The hook. Marina's knees buckled, and she grabbed the edge of the nearest cradle for support, her fingers tracing the delicate scrollwork carved into the headboard. The wood was warm beneath her touch, impossibly smooth, as if loving hands had polished it for decades. The craftsmanship was breathtaking, each curve and flourish more intricate than anything she'd ever seen in the furniture stores downtown. But it was the dates that made her blood run cold. She moved from cradle to cradle like a sleepwalker, reading each brass nameplate with growing horror. Isabella Castillo, 1923. Carmen Castillo, 1954. Elena Castillo, 1978, the year Marina was born. Her mother's nameplate gleamed as if recently polished, while the others had dulled with age. And Sophia's cradle, sitting apart from the others like a throne waiting for its princess, bore tomorrow's date in crisp, fresh engraving. "This is insane," Marina whispered, her voice echoing in the stifling storage unit. The October heat pressed down on her like a physical weight, making the musty air thick and hard to breathe. She pulled out her phone, hands shaking as she dialed her best friend Carla. "Girl, you sound like you've seen a ghost." Carla's voice crackled through the speaker after Marina explained where she was. "It's probably just some weird hobby your mom had. You know how crafty she was." But Marina barely remembered her mother being crafty. Elena had worked double shifts at the cannery, coming home exhausted and covered in the sweet smell of peaches. The only thing Marina remembered her making was tamales at Christmas, and even then she'd seemed distracted, always listening for something that never came. "Carla, you don't understand. The name Sophia, I've never said it out loud, not to anyone." A pause. "Okay, that's weird. But honey, people guess names all the time. Maybe your mom had dreams about it or something. You know how mothers are with that intuition stuff." Marina wanted to believe that explanation desperately. But as she stared at the rows of cradles stretching into the shadows of the storage unit, intuition felt like too small a word for whatever this was. She ended the call and ventured deeper into the unit, pushing aside paint-splattered tarps to reveal more impossible things. A workbench covered in carving tools, their handles worn smooth from use. Sketches pinned to a pegboard showing cradle designs in Elena's careful handwriting. And beneath it all, a small wooden box that rattled when Marina lifted it. Inside, she found brass nameplates that hadn't been used yet, their surfaces blank and waiting. At the bottom of the box lay a folded piece of paper, yellow with age. Marina's hands trembled as she unfolded it, revealing her mother's familiar script. "Mija, if you're reading this, then I failed. I tried so hard to break the pattern, to save you from this inheritance. But the bloodline is strong, and some gifts cannot be refused. Look for the journal behind Isabella's cradle. Understand that everything I did, every year of silence, was because I loved you too much to watch you live in fear. Te amo para siempre, Mama." Marina's vision blurred, as tears she'd been holding back for months finally spilled over. Her mother's funeral had been a small affair, just Marina, Carla, and a handful of Elena's co-workers who barely knew her. No extended family, no explanations, no closure. Just a casket holding the woman who'd raised Marina alone until that terrible fight when Marina turned 16. The fight that had ended with Elena shouting, "It's for your own good," as Marina stormed out to live with Carla's family. 15 years of silence, 15 years of wondering what she'd done wrong. Now, surrounded by wooden cradles and the ghost of her mother's love, Marina wondered if she'd had it backward all along. She found Isabella's cradle in the far corner, its nameplate dated 1923, nearly a century old. The wood was darker than the others, almost black with age, but when Marina ran her hand along the back panel, she felt something loose. A hidden compartment opened with a soft click, revealing a leather journal wrapped in oilcloth. The first page was written in Spanish, in handwriting so faded it was barely legible. But Marina could make out enough to understand, "El don viene con un precio." The gift comes with a price. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Ramirez's office, reminding her about tomorrow's appointment, October 15th, the same date engraved on Sophia's nameplate. Routine checkup, 37 weeks, everything progressing normally. Marina pressed a hand to her belly, feeling Sophia's strong kick in response. Her daughter was healthy, active, perfect. There was no reason to think anything would go wrong. But as she stared at the journal in her hands, at the cradles surrounding her like silent sentinels, Marina couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing at the edge of something vast and terrible. Something that had been waiting for her long before she was born, patient as stone, inevitable as the turning of seasons. Tomorrow couldn't come fast enough. And yet she was terrified it would come at all. The drive home felt like moving through water. Marina gripped the steering wheel of her ancient Honda Civic, the leather journal from Isabella's cradle burning like a brand where it sat on the passenger seat beside her purse. Every red light stretched into eternity, every familiar landmark along Ming Avenue seeming foreign and ominous. The October sun slanted through her windshield, casting everything in the golden, desperate light of late afternoon. Her apartment complex squatted like a collection of cardboard boxes in the heat, its stucco walls the color of old mustard. Marina had lived in Unit 2B for 3 years now, ever since she'd graduated nursing school and landed her job at Mercy General. It wasn't much, a cramped one-bedroom with a kitchen the size of a closet, but it had been hers. Safe, predictable. Now, as she climbed the exterior stairs with one hand on the railing and the other supporting her lower back, the familiar ache of exhaustion felt different. Heavier, like her body was carrying more than just Sophia's weight. Inside, the apartment told the story of a woman preparing for motherhood on a shoestring budget. Sophia's nursery corner occupied half the living room, separated by a folding screen Marina had found at a garage sale and painted pale yellow. The crib, a simple white metal frame from Walmart, looked painfully ordinary compared to the intricate, wooden cradles she'd just left behind. Newborn clothes hung in neat rows on a drying rack, all of them gifts from her baby shower or purchases from the Goodwill down the street. Marina set the journal on her kitchen counter next to a stack of unpaid bills and forced herself to go through the motions of normal life. She made herself a peanut butter sandwich, choked down a prenatal vitamin with a glass of milk, and tried to ignore how the journal seemed to pulse with malevolent energy just 3 feet away. Her phone rang as she was pretending to eat. Carla's name flashed on the screen. "So," Carla's voice was bright with curiosity. "Did you find anything good in there? Please tell me your mom left you something valuable. God knows you could use the money right now." Marina stared at the journal, thinking of brass nameplates and dates that shouldn't exist. Just some old furniture, nothing special. Damn, well, at least you didn't lose much on the gamble. $200 isn't the end of the world. But it might as well have been. Marina's bank account had exactly $347 in it, and payday wasn't for another week. Her rent was due on the 1st, the electric bill sat overdue on her counter, and she still needed to buy Sophia's car seat before the baby arrived. The $200 storage unit fee had been pure desperation, a Hail Mary thrown at the hope that her mother might have left behind something, anything, that could help. "Listen, I've got to prep for my shift tonight," Carla continued. She worked as a dispatcher for the county sheriff's department, pulling overnight shifts that left her perpetually tired but surprisingly well-informed about every piece of gossip in Bakersfield. "But let's grab lunch tomorrow after your doctor's appointment, okay? You can tell me all about your treasure hunt. Tomorrow, October 15th. The date burned in Marina's mind as she hung up and forced herself to finish her sandwich. She tried to establish some semblance of routine. Shower, check. Comfortable clothes that accommodated her swollen belly. Check. Review her schedule for the coming week. She was pulling 3 12-hour shifts at the hospital, which would leave her exhausted but help pad her pathetic bank balance. At Mercy General, Marina worked in the maternity ward. The irony wasn't lost on her that she spent her days helping other women bring healthy babies into the world, while carrying a child that some ancient family curse apparently wanted to claim. She loved her job, loved the moment when a new life took its first breath, loved being the steady, competent hands that guided families through one of the most important days of their lives. But tonight, the thought of going back to work on Thursday filled her with dread. How could she coach another woman through labor when her own delivery might be? Marina pressed both hands to her belly, feeling Sophia shift in response. Her daughter was strong, healthy, perfect. Dr. Ramirez had said so just last week. All the ultrasounds were normal, all the tests came back fine. There was no medical reason to think anything would go wrong. As evening settled over Bakersfield, painting her apartment in shades of amber and shadow, Marina found herself standing in Sophia's corner, one hand resting on the simple crib rail. She'd imagined this moment so many times, bringing her daughter home, watching her sleep in the safety of their little apartment, building a life together that would be everything Marina's childhood hadn't been. Stable, present, full of love instead of silence. The journal waited on her kitchen counter, patient as the cradles in that suffocating storage unit. Eventually, she would have to open it, would have to read whatever her mother had been too afraid to tell her while she was alive. But not tonight. Tonight, she would cling to the ordinary world of unpaid bills and 12-hour shifts, of baby clothes drying on racks and friends who worried about money instead of curses. Tomorrow would bring answers she wasn't ready to face. The call to adventure. Marina woke to her phone buzzing against the nightstand at 2:17 a.m., Sophia's restless movements having already pulled her from uneasy sleep. She squinted at the screen, expecting to see Dr. Ramirez's emergency service, or maybe Carla checking in after her shift. Instead, an unknown local number glowed in the darkness. "Hello?" Her voice came out as a croak. Silence stretched across the line, punctuated only by what sounded like shallow breathing. Marina was about to hang up when a voice whispered through the static, elderly, trembling, speaking rapid Spanish with an accent she couldn't place. "Eres la hija de Elena? Are you Elena's daughter?" Marina sat up straighter, one hand automatically moving to her belly. "Who is this?" "Listen carefully, mija. Time grows short. You found the cradle, sigh, and the journal?" The woman's voice carried an urgency that made Marina's skin crawl. "Your mother, she came to me many times seeking answers. But some doors, once opened, cannot be closed again. I don't understand. Who are... Tomorrow you must not go alone to your appointment. The date, it calls to what sleeps in your blood. You carry more than a baby now. You carry the choice that will determine whether the line continues or ends. The line went dead." Marina stared at her phone, heart hammering against her ribs. She tried calling back, but the number went straight to a disconnected message. She Googled it, searched social media, even tried the reverse lookup sites she'd bookmarked during her nursing school research projects. Nothing. Sleep became impossible. Marina found herself pacing the small apartment, her bare feet silent on the worn carpet, Sophia's movements growing more agitated with each pass. The journal on the kitchen counter seemed to pulse in her peripheral vision like a heartbeat, demanding attention she wasn't ready to give. By 4 a.m. she gave up pretending and made herself tea with shaking hands. The stranger's words echoed in her mind, "You carry more than a baby now." What did that even mean, and how had this woman known about the journal, the cradles, the appointment? Marina pulled up her mother's old contact information, scrolling through the sparse call history from the months before Elena's death. Those final voicemails she'd deleted in anger, thinking they were just more guilt trips and manipulation. Now she wished desperately she could hear them again, search for clues she'd been too hurt to recognize. Her laptop, balanced precariously on a stack of medical textbooks, seemed to mock her with its slow boot-up time. Marina's fingers flew across the keyboard, searching for anything about her family name, about the dates on those cradles, about women dying in childbirth. The internet yielded scattered genealogy records, old newspaper obituaries that made her stomach lurch, and a single academic paper about traditional Mexican blessing rituals that mentioned bloodline gifts passed through maternal lines. The academic paper, published in the Journal of Folkloric Studies, featured a photograph that made Marina's breath catch. A wooden cradle, intricately carved, sitting in what appeared to be a museum display. The caption read, "Traditional Mexican birthing cradle, circa 1890, believed to possess protective properties. Origin unknown, donated to the Kern County Historical Society by Elena Castillo, 2019. Her mother had donated one of the cradles, but which one? And why?" Marina's phone rang again at 6:15 a.m., just as pale light began filtering through her kitchen window. This time she recognized the number, Dr. Ramirez's office. "Marina, it's Linda from Dr. Ramirez's office. I know it's early, but I wanted to catch you before you left for work." Linda's cheerful nurse voice carried an undertone of concern. "We've had a scheduling conflict come up, and we need to move your appointment today. Would 11 a.m. work instead of 2 p.m.? Earlier. The appointment that was supposed to happen on October 15th at 2 p.m., the exact time engraved on Sophia's nameplate, was being moved 3 hours ahead. Actually, Marina heard herself say, "I think I'd like to reschedule for next week. I'm not feeling well." A pause. "Oh, honey, you're 37 weeks. We really shouldn't push this back. Dr. Ramirez just wants to check on Sophia's position and make sure everything's progressing normally for delivery. It'll be quick, I promise." Sophia chose that moment to deliver a particularly strong kick, as if reminding Marina that regardless of mysterious phone calls and ancient cradles, she was still very much pregnant and very much in need of medical care. Marina stared at the journal on her counter, thinking of her mother's note. "Everything I did, every year of silence, was because I loved you too much to watch you live in fear." "Marina, are you still there?" The choice crystallized in that moment, sharp as broken glass. She could reschedule, avoid the appointment altogether, pretend the cradles and the journal and the stranger's phone call were elaborate coincidences. She could cling to her ordinary world of medical checkups and rational explanations. Or she could stop running from whatever truth her mother had died trying to protect her from. 11 o'clock is fine," Marina said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'll be there." After hanging up with Dr. Ramirez's office, Marina stood frozen in her kitchen, the weight of her decisions settling over her like a heavy blanket. The morning light streaming through her window felt harsh now, illuminating the stark reality of what she'd just committed to. 11 o'clock, 3 hours earlier than the time carved into Sophia's nameplate, but still October 15th. Still the date that had haunted her dreams since discovering the cradles. Her hands trembled as she reached for the journal, then pulled back as if it might burn her. What if she was making the biggest mistake of her life? What if that stranger on the phone had been right? What if going to the appointment alone was exactly what she shouldn't do? But who could she call? Carla would think she'd lost her mind if Marina tried to explain about mysterious late-night phone calls and cursed bloodlines. Dr. Ramirez's office would recommend psychiatric evaluation if she started babbling about ancient family curses during what should be a routine prenatal checkup. And her mother, the one person who might have had answers, was 6 months dead, taking her secrets with her. Marina sank into her kitchen chair, one hand pressed to her belly where Sophia seemed to be doing gymnastics. "What do you think, baby girl?" she whispered. "Is Mama going crazy, or are we really in some kind of trouble?" Sophia's response was a sharp kick directly to Marina's ribs, strong enough to make her gasp. At 37 weeks, her daughter was fully formed, ready to be born, ready to take her place in a world that suddenly felt full of hidden dangers. The rational part of Marina's mind, the nurse who delivered dozens of healthy babies, knew that 99% of pregnancies ended in joy, not tragedy. Modern medicine had made childbirth safer than it had ever been in human history. But the woman who'd found those cradles, who'd read her mother's desperate note, who'd received that terrifying phone call, that woman couldn't stop thinking about the 1%. The statistical anomalies, the cases where everything went wrong despite perfect prenatal care and normal test results. She thought about the genealogy research she'd started, those scattered obituary records that made her stomach clench. How many women in her family had died in childbirth? How far back did this pattern go? And why had her mother spent decades carving cradles that seemed to predict each death with impossible accuracy? The journal sat on her counter like a challenge, its leather binding worn smooth by decades of handling. Marina knew she should open it, should read whatever her mother had been too afraid to share while alive. But every time she reached for it, that stranger's words echoed in her mind. Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed again. What if ignorance really was bliss? What if there were some truths too terrible to know? Her phone buzzed with a text message, and Marina nearly jumped out of her skin. But it was just a reminder from her banking app that her account balance had dropped below $500. The electric bill was due tomorrow, rent in 2 weeks, and she still needed Sophia's car seat. The mundane realities of being a single mother on a nurse's salary felt almost comforting compared to the supernatural dread that had been building in her chest. She forced herself to go through her morning routine: shower, prenatal vitamins, the same breakfast of toast and orange juice she'd eaten every day for months. Normal things, safe things. The kind of routine that had anchored her through nursing school, through her mother's death, through the terrifying realization that she was going to raise a child completely alone. But nothing felt normal anymore. The toast tasted like cardboard, the orange juice burned her throat, and every movement felt weighted with significance. When she reached for her purse, her fingers brushed against the edge of the journal, sending an electric shock up her arm that had nothing to do with static electricity. By 10 o'clock, Marina was pacing her living room in expanding circles, her hospital ID badge clipped to her shirt, car keys clutched in her sweaty palm. She'd changed clothes 3 times, unable to decide what someone wore to potentially meet their fate. The appointment was routine, she reminded herself. Just a checkup. Dr. Ramirez would measure her belly, listen to Sophia's heartbeat, maybe do another ultrasound to check the baby's position. She'd be home by noon, feeling foolish for letting her imagination run wild. But as she stood at her front door, one hand on the doorknob, Marina felt the full weight of her isolation pressing down on her shoulders. No partner to hold her hand during the appointment, no mother to call for reassurance, no extended family who might know whether she was losing her mind or stumbling towards something that had been waiting for her since the day she was born. Just her, Sophia, and whatever truth waited in that journal she was too afraid to read. The clock on her microwave read 10:47 a.m. If she left now, she'd arrive exactly on time for an appointment that might change everything. Marina's hand froze on the doorknob, the metal cool against her sweaty palm. The weight of the moment pressed against her chest like a physical force, and she realized with crystal clarity that this was it, the point of no return. Whatever happened after she walked through this door, there would be no going back to the comfortable ignorance she'd lived in just 2 days ago. The journal in her purse seemed to pulse with malevolent energy, and she found herself pulling it out with trembling fingers. Her mother's handwriting stared up at her from the cover, those careful letters that had once meant bedtime stories and birthday cards, now carrying the weight of generational secrets. Everything I did, every year of silence, was because I loved you too much to watch you live in fear. I'm already living in fear, Mama, Marina whispered to the empty apartment, her voice cracking. You just made sure I'd have to face it alone. Sophia shifted restlessly inside her, as if responding to her mother's distress. The movement triggered a cascade of physical sensations, the familiar pressure against her ribs, the awkward weight that made every step deliberate, the constant reminder that she was no longer just herself. She was carrying the future of her bloodline, and according to those impossible cradles, that future was supposed to end tomorrow. Marina opened the journal to the first page, her hands shaking so violently she could barely make out the words. Her mother's familiar script filled the yellowed paper, but the ink looked different here, darker, more urgent, as if written under extreme stress. October 1995. Marina turned 16 today. I should have told her everything by now, should have prepared her for what's coming. But how do you explain to a child that her very existence is both miracle and curse? That every woman in our line carries the same terrible choice, save yourself or save your daughter? The words blurred as tears filled Marina's eyes. She flipped ahead, scanning entries that spanned decades, each one documenting her mother's desperate search for answers, for some way to break what she called the binding. The curandera in Delano says it began with my great-great-grandmother, Esperanza, a deal made in desperation, protection for her children in exchange for. But the old woman won't say what was promised, only that some debts pass through blood, and that the cradles mark those who must choose. Marina's legs gave out, and she sank onto her couch, the journal falling open to a page near the back. This entry was dated just 3 months before her mother's death. I found her, the woman who holds the other half of the story. She lives in the old barrio, calls herself Senora Vega, though I think that's not her real name. She knew things about our family that no one should know. About the cradles, about the dates, about why the women die. Your daughter doesn't have to follow the pattern, she told me, but only if she chooses willingly to cross the threshold. The binding requires consent. It cannot take what is freely given to break it. I don't understand what she means, but I'm running out of time to figure it out. The clock on her microwave now read 10:52. If she didn't leave in the next few minutes, she'd be late for the appointment that might determine everything. But Marina couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what she was reading. Her mother had found someone who knew about the family curse. Someone who might still be alive. Senora Vega, the old barrio. Marina's fingers flew over her phone screen, searching for the name, for any mention of a woman who might hold the answers her mother had died seeking. Nothing appeared in the usual searches, but when she typed Curandera Bakersfield into Google, a single result appeared. A Yelp review from 3 years ago mentioning a woman who did traditional healing in the neighborhoods near the railroad tracks. Her phone rang, making her jump. Dr. Ramirez's office again. Marina, it's Linda. You're cutting it close, honey. Should we expect you in the next 10 minutes? The moment crystallized around her like breaking glass. She could hang up, claim she was too sick to come in, spend the day hiding in her apartment pretending none of this was real, or she could do what her mother never had the courage to do, face the truth head on, whatever the consequences. I'll be there, Marina said, her voice stronger than she felt. But I need to make a stop first. She hung up before Linda could respond and grabbed her keys with shaking hands. The journal went back into her purse, along with her phone and the scrap of paper where she'd written down the area where Senora Vega might live. As Marina stepped through her front door, she felt the last threads of her old life snapping behind her. No more pretending this was just about an overactive imagination. No more believing she could protect Sophia by staying ignorant. She was crossing into unknown territory now, leaving behind everything safe and familiar to chase answers that might destroy her. But as Sophia kicked against her ribs with determined strength, Marina knew she had no choice. Some thresholds, once approached, demanded to be crossed. Marina drove through Bakersfield's morning traffic with a desperate urgency that made her hands slick on the steering wheel. The neighborhoods near the railroad tracks stretched out before her like a maze of uncertainty, each street more unfamiliar than the last. She'd grown up in this town, but this part felt foreign, older, forgotten, the kind of place where secrets could hide for generations. The Yelp review had been maddeningly vague. Lady near the tracks helped my abuela with traditional stuff. Don't have an address, but she's in the blue house with all the plants. 3 years old. No follow-up. No name except the username Saratab87. But it was the only lead Marina had. And time was hemorrhaging away from her with each passing minute. She turned down Flower Street and Kentucky, scanning for anything that might match the description. The houses here were small, weathered, many with chain-link fences and dead lawns that spoke of residents struggling just to survive. Not so different from her own neighborhood, really, except these streets felt charged with something she couldn't name, an electricity that made Sophia restless in her belly. Then she saw it. A modest blue house set back from the street, its tiny front yard exploding with plant life that defied the October season. Roses bloomed impossibly red next to herbs Marina recognized from the hospital's alternative medicine pamphlets. Sage, lavender, and others she couldn't identify created a riot of green that seemed to shimmer in the morning light. Marina parked with shaking hands, checking her phone. 11:08 a.m. She was already late for the appointment, but turning back now felt impossible. Something about this place pulled at her, the same magnetic force she'd felt when touching those cradles. The woman who answered her tentative knock looked nothing like what Marina had expected. Senora Vega, if this was her, appeared to be in her 60s, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that seemed to see everything at once. She wore a simple dress covered by an apron dusted with what looked like flour, and her hands were stained green from working with plants. "You're Elena's daughter," the woman said before Marina could speak. Not a question. A statement delivered with the calm certainty of someone who'd been expecting this moment for years. Marina's knees nearly buckled. "How did you— I've been looking for you. My mother's journal mentioned—" "Come inside, mija. We don't have much time." Senora Vega stepped back, gesturing Marina into a living room that smelled of herbs and something else, something ancient and earthy that made the hair on her arms stand up. "You should have been here weeks ago. The closer you get to your date, the stronger the pull becomes." The house felt bigger inside than it appeared from the street, with rooms that seemed to flow into each other in ways that defied geometry. Every surface was covered with plants, crystals, and objects Marina couldn't identify. Candles flickered in the corners despite the morning light streaming through the windows. "My date?" Marina sank into a chair that seemed to mold itself around her pregnant belly. "You mean October 15th? The date on the cradle?" Senora Vega nodded, settling across from her with the fluid grace of someone much younger. "Your mother came to me many times over the years, always asking the same questions: how to break what cannot be broken, how to save what was promised long before you were born." She paused, studying Marina's face with those unnervingly perceptive eyes. But she never understood the most important truth, which is— Marina's voice came out as barely a whisper— that the binding doesn't require your death, Mia. It requires your choice. Sophia chose that moment to kick so hard that Marina gasped, doubling over slightly. Senora Vega was beside her instantly, weathered hands pressed gently to Marina's belly. The moment their skin made contact, Marina felt something shift, a warmth that spread through her entire body, calming both her and the baby. "She knows," the older woman murmured, wonder creeping into her voice. "The little one, she understands what you're carrying. Your daughter is strong, Marina. Strong enough to break a chain that's bound your family for 5 generations. "I don't understand any of this." Marina pulled back, frustration and fear warring in her chest. Everyone keeps talking in riddles about choices and bindings and thresholds, but no one will tell me what's actually happening to me. Senora Vega's expression softened with something that might have been sympathy. Because, mija, some knowledge can only be received when you're ready to act on it. And you're not ready yet. You're still thinking like someone who believes she's a victim of fate, instead of someone who holds the power to reshape it. Marina's phone buzzed insistently. Dr. Ramirez's office again, the normal world demanding she return to checkups and medical explanations and the comfortable illusion that she had any control over what happened next. Answer it, Senora Vega said quietly. But know this, when you walk into that doctor's office today, you'll be walking into the first test. How you handle what comes next will determine whether you're ready to hear the rest of the truth. Marina stared at her phone, Dr. Ramirez's name flashing on the screen like an ultimatum. Her finger hovered over the answer button, caught between two worlds that seemed increasingly impossible to reconcile. Behind her, Senora Vega waited with the patience of someone who had watched this same moment unfold across generations. Marina Castillo speaking, she finally answered, her voice steadier than her hands. Where are you? Dr. Ramirez's concern cut through the phone's speaker. Linda says you're 20 minutes late. That's not like you. Marina closed her eyes, feeling the weight of normal expectations pressing against the supernatural reality she'd stumbled into. Dr. Ramirez had delivered her through nursing school rotations, had been nothing but kind and professional through 8 months of prenatal care. The woman deserved better than cryptic excuses about family curses and ancient bindings. I'm sorry, I got delayed. I'm on my way now. Marina. The doctor's tone shifted, becoming more personal. Is everything all right? You've seemed different these past few weeks. Distracted. If there's something going on, stress, depression, family issues, we need to talk about it. You're so close to delivery, and I need to know you're taking care of yourself. The irony hit Marina like a physical blow. Everyone wanted to take care of her. Dr. Ramirez, the nurses at the hospital, even her distant relatives who called occasionally to check in. But none of them could protect her from whatever was coming on October 15th, because none of them knew it existed. I'll be there in 15 minutes, Marina said, ending the call before her resolve could crumble. Senora Vega was studying her with those penetrating eyes when she turned around. You're going to tell her, the older woman said. It wasn't a question. Tell her what? That I think my family is cursed? That I found cradles with impossible dates carved into them? Marina's laugh carried a sharp edge of hysteria. She'll recommend a psychiatrist and probably call social services. You're going to tell her because you've spent your whole adult life building trust in the medical world. And you can't let go of that safety net. Not yet. Senora Vega rose from her chair with fluid grace. But listen carefully, Mia. When the tests come back normal, when everything looks perfect on paper, remember that some realities exist beyond what machines can measure. Marina felt something cold settle in her stomach. What do you mean, when the tests come back normal? Your body is preparing for transformation, not death. The binding doesn't work through medical complications, Marina. It works through choice, yours, and Sophia's. Senora Vega moved to a bookshelf crowded with objects Marina couldn't identify. Your mother never understood this. She spent 30 years looking for a medical explanation, a way to cheat death through modern medicine. She never realized that what's coming isn't death at all. Then what is it? The question tore from Marina's throat. Senora Vega pulled something from the shelf, a small wooden box worn smooth by countless hands. The threshold your ancestors promised to cross, the price they agreed to pay for protection that's kept your bloodline alive for over a century. She held the box without opening it. Every woman who came before you faced the same moment, walked through willingly, or watched their daughter pay the price instead. Sophia kicked again, a fluttering movement that felt almost like agreement. Marina pressed her hand to her belly, trying to understand how her unborn daughter could be part of something so ancient and incomprehensible. I need to go, Marina whispered, backing toward the door. The walls of the strange house seemed to pulse around her, reality bending at the edges of her vision. I can't. This is too much. It was too much for your mother, too, and your grandmother, and every woman who carried this burden before you. Senora Vega's voice followed her to the door, gentle but relentless. But running from it won't make it disappear, mija. It will only make you face alone. Marina fumbled with the doorknob, desperate to escape into the ordinary world of traffic and medical appointments and problems that could be solved with insurance cards and prenatal vitamins. But as she stepped back into the October sunshine, she felt the invisible threads that connected her to this place, to this woman, to whatever truth waited in that wooden box. Her car felt like a sanctuary, familiar and mundane after the charged atmosphere of Senora Vega's house. But as Marina started the engine, she caught sight of the older woman standing in her doorway, still holding the mysterious box. Their eyes met through the windshield, and Marina felt a jolt of recognition that went deeper than memory. This wasn't their first meeting. Somehow, impossibly, she'd been walking toward this moment her entire life. The drive to Dr. Ramirez's office passed in a blur of overthinking and mounting dread. With each mile, the normal world reasserted itself. Traffic lights and radio commercials and the comfortable weight of her hospital ID badge against her chest. But underneath it all, Sophia moved with increasing restlessness, as if she too sensed they were approaching something that would change everything. The medical building's fluorescent lights felt harsh after the herb-scented dimness of Senora Vega's house. Marina signed in at the reception desk with hands that still trembled, acutely aware that she was crossing another threshold, this one leading back into the world of medical certainty she'd always trusted to keep her safe. "Marina?" Linda appeared almost immediately, her usual warm smile tinged with concern. "Dr. Ramirez wants to see you right away. She's worried about you." The familiar hallway stretched before them, lined with the same motivational posters about maternal health that Marina had memorized over 8 months of appointments. "Your body knows what to do. Trust the process. Every birth is a miracle." The words felt like mockery now, hollow platitudes that couldn't touch whatever was really happening to her. Dr. Ramirez looked up from her computer as they entered the examination room, and Marina saw her professional mask slip for just a moment. The doctor's dark eyes held genuine worry, the kind that came from caring for patients as people, not just medical cases. "Marina, I'm glad you're here. But I have to say, you look exhausted." Dr. Ramirez gestured to the examination table. "Are you sleeping? Eating regularly?" Marina settled onto the crinkled paper, the routine of it providing momentary comfort. This was familiar territory, blood pressure cuffs and fetal monitors, questions she'd answered dozens of times before. Except now, with Senora Vega's words still echoing in her mind, even the most ordinary medical equipment seemed charged with new significance. "I've been having strange dreams," Marina said carefully, testing the waters. "About my family. My mother's death." Dr. Ramirez's expression softened as she wrapped the blood pressure cuff around Marina's arm. "That's completely normal at this stage. Your mind is processing everything about becoming a mother yourself. The loss of your own mother especially. That's bound to surface now." The cuff tightened, released. 140/90. That's elevated for you." Dr. Ramirez frowned at the reading. "Let's check your reflexes and see how Sophia's doing." The fetal monitor came next, its steady beeping filling the small room as it tracked Sophia's heartbeat. Marina watched the green lines spike and dip on the screen, each peak representing her daughter's strong, steady pulse. Normal, healthy, exactly what any doctor would want to see at 37 weeks. "Beautiful," Dr. Ramirez murmured, adjusting the monitor's position. "Her heart rate is perfect. She's moving well, positioned correctly. Medically speaking, there's absolutely nothing to worry about." Medically speaking. The phrase hung in the air like a limitation, a boundary that suddenly felt incredibly small. Marina thought of the cradles, of dates carved with impossible precision, of patterns that span generations without leaving any trace in medical records. "Doctor," Marina said slowly, "what if there were family factors you couldn't see in tests? Genetic things that didn't show up in the usual screenings?" Dr. Ramirez looked up from the monitor, her eyebrows drawing together. "What kind of factors? Have you remembered something from your family history that we should know about?" The moment balanced on a knife's edge. Marina could feel Sophia responding to her elevated heart rate, movement becoming more agitated as maternal stress flooded her system. Everything rational told her to stay quiet, to trust the medical evidence that said she and her daughter were fine. But Senora Vega's voice whispered in her memory, "When the tests come back normal, when everything looks perfect on paper, remember that some realities exist beyond what machines can measure." "My mother died in childbirth," Marina said, the words feeling like jumping off a cliff. "And her mother, and her grandmother before that." I know it sounds crazy, but what if there's some pattern that doesn't show up in genetic testing? Dr. Ramirez sat back, her expression shifting into clinical assessment mode. Marina, obstetric care has advanced dramatically even in the past generation. The complications that might have affected your mother and grandmother, we can prevent or treat most of those now. Your prenatal care has been textbook perfect. She pulled up Marina's chart on her computer, scrolling through months of test results. Look at this. Normal glucose screening, normal blood pressure until today, excellent fetal growth, no signs of preeclampsia or placental issues. Whatever happened to the women in your family before, you're not following that pattern. The green line on the fetal monitor spiked suddenly, Sophia's heart rate jumping to over 160 beats per minute. Both women stared at the screen as the baby's agitation became unmistakable. That's stress response, Dr. Ramirez said, reaching to adjust the monitor. She's picking up on your anxiety. Marina, I need you to breathe with me. Deep breath in. But Marina could barely hear her. She was staring at the clock on the wall, 12:33 p.m., October 14th. Less than 12 hours remained until the date carved on Sophia's cradle. And here she sat in a medical office where everything looked normal, everything tested fine, everything suggested she was worrying about nothing. Except Sophia's heart rate wouldn't settle. And somewhere across town, Senora Vega waited with a wooden box full of answers Marina wasn't sure she was brave enough to hear. The ordeal, Marina realized with crystalline clarity, wasn't coming tomorrow. It was happening right now. Dr. Ramirez, something's wrong. Marina's voice cut through the steady beeping as Sophia's heart rate climbed even higher, the green line on the monitor painting jagged peaks that made no medical sense. Marina, I need you to stay calm. But Dr. Ramirez's own voice had tightened, her fingers flying over the monitor's controls as she tried to get a clearer reading. Sometimes the monitor's alarm shrieked to life as Sophia's heart rate hit 180 beats per minute. Dr. Ramirez lunged for the emergency call button, her professional composure cracking as she barked orders to Linda through the intercom. Get me an ultrasound machine in here now, and call labor and delivery. We might need an emergency transport. Marina felt the world tilt sideways. This was exactly what she'd feared, what every woman in her family had faced. The medical crisis that would steal everything from her, just like the cradles had predicted. Will she be okay? We're going to take care of both of you, Dr. Ramirez said, but her hands were shaking as she repositioned the fetal monitor. Sometimes stress can cause false readings. We need to see what's actually happening. The ultrasound machine arrived with Linda and another nurse Marina didn't recognize. The room filled with urgent professional voices, blood pressure checks, preparations, calls to the hospital. Marina watched it all unfold around her as if she were drowning, the familiar medical procedures that had always comforted her now feeling like preparations for disaster. There. Dr. Ramirez's voice carried profound relief as Sophia's image appeared on the ultrasound screen. The baby moved normally, her heart beating steadily in the real-time image. Look, Marina, she's fine, completely fine. The monitor was malfunctioning. But even as the medical crisis dissolved, Marina felt something else taking its place, a certainty that chilled her more than Sophia's racing heartbeat ever could. The equipment hadn't malfunctioned. Something had triggered it, something that existed in the spaces between what machines could measure. Her phone rang. Senora Vega's number. Don't answer that, Dr. Ramirez said sharply, noting Marina's distraction. I need you focused here. We're going to run a full workup. Blood tests, extended monitoring, the works. I want to make absolutely sure there's nothing we're missing. Marina stared at her phone as it stopped ringing, then immediately started again. On the ultrasound screen, Sophia had gone completely still, as if she too were waiting for something. I have to take this, Marina whispered. Marina, no. You're having a medical emergency. But Marina was already answering. What's happening? Senora Vega's voice came through the speaker with terrible urgency. The binding is accelerating. You felt it, didn't you? The pull. Dr. Ramirez stepped forward, her face flushed with professional indignation. Who is this? Marina, you cannot take medical advice from... It's starting early, Senora Vega continued, ignoring the chaos in the background. October 14th at sunset, not 15th. Your daughter is stronger than I thought. She's pulling you toward the threshold ahead of schedule. The room erupted. Dr. Ramirez was demanding Marina hang up. Linda was trying to get another blood pressure reading, and the monitoring equipment was beeping with increasingly frantic alarms. But Marina could only hear Senora Vega's voice cutting through it all like a blade. "You have 3 hours, Mia. 3 hours to decide whether you'll walk through willingly or let fate choose for you." The line went dead. Marina looked around the medical room that had felt like sanctuary just minutes before, seeing it now for what it really was, a beautiful, sophisticated trap. All these machines, all this expertise, all these people who genuinely wanted to help her, and none of it could touch what was actually happening. "Marina, I need you to listen to me." Dr. Ramirez was speaking with forced calm, the kind medical professionals used when they thought a patient might be having a breakdown. "You're experiencing severe anxiety, possibly postpartum psychosis starting early. These thoughts about family curses, they're not real. But I can help you through this." "You think I'm crazy." Marina's voice sounded hollow in her own ears. "I think you're scared and overwhelmed, and someone is taking advantage of that." Dr. Ramirez pulled up a chair, sitting at Marina's eye level. "This woman on the phone, whoever she is, she's playing on your fears about your mother's death. But I promise you, medical science has moved far beyond whatever happened to previous generations." On the ultrasound screen, Sophia began moving again, her tiny hand reaching toward something only she could see. Marina watched her daughter's face in profile, seeing something ancient and knowing in those delicate features. Sophia had been trying to warn her, the accelerated heartbeat, the restlessness, even the timing of the monitor malfunction. It had all been her daughter's way of saying what Senora Vega had just confirmed. Time was running out, and Marina was sitting in exactly the wrong place when she needed to be making the most important choice of her life. The medical world had failed her completely, and she didn't even know what she was supposed to choose. Marina stared at the ultrasound screen, watching Sophia's tiny hand reach toward an invisible presence, and suddenly everything clicked into place with devastating clarity. "The cradles," she whispered. Dr. Ramirez leaned forward, concern deepening in her eyes. "What cradles, Marina?" But Marina wasn't talking to her anymore. She was talking to Sophia, to the ancient understanding that passed between them across the barrier of flesh and time. "You've been trying to tell me, all this time, the movement, the restlessness, even today's episode. You know what's coming." On the screen, Sophia's face turned toward the transducer with impossible awareness. For one breathtaking moment, her eyes seemed to look directly at Marina through the grainy black and white image, and in that gaze was knowledge far older than her 37 weeks of existence. Marina's breath caught as the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. "It's not a curse." The words came out barely audible, but they hit the room like a thunderclap. Dr. Ramirez was saying something about stress and anxiety. Linda was adjusting equipment, but Marina couldn't hear any of it. She was lost in her daughter's eyes, in the truth that had been hiding in plain sight for 8 months. "It's a choice," Marina continued, her voice growing stronger. "Every woman in my family, they didn't die, they chose." The revelation poured through her like light, illuminating connections she'd been too afraid to see. Elena's disappearance when Marina turned 16, the exact age she'd be when her own grandmother died. The voicemails about protecting the family. The cradles carved not with death dates but with transformation dates. Walk through willingly, or watch their daughter pay the price instead. "My mother didn't abandon me," Marina whispered, tears streaming down her face as understanding bloomed. "She was protecting me from having to make this choice too young." Dr. Ramirez's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Marina, you're not making sense. I need you to focus on what's real." "This is real." Marina turned to face her, and something in her expression made the doctor step back. "More real than anything in this room. My mother spent 16 years preparing for this moment, and when she realized I wasn't ready, that I was still a child who needed more time, she chose to wait." The monitor's beeping had returned to normal, but Marina barely noticed. She was seeing her entire life rewritten in the space of a heartbeat. Elena's sudden distance, the way she'd stopped talking about family history, stopped sharing the stories that had filled Marina's childhood, the careful way she'd rebuilt her life around providing for Marina's future without ever explaining why. She knew she'd have to face it eventually, Marina continued, the words pouring out as fast as her mind could process them. But she wanted to give me every possible year to grow up first, to become strong enough to understand what the choice really meant. Sophia moved again on the screen, A slow, graceful stretch that looked almost like a dance. Or a goodbye. Marina's hand flew to her belly. You're not just my daughter. You're all of them. Every woman who walked through that threshold before you. That's how the protection works. That's how the bloodline survived. The room around her seemed to shift and blur, reality bending to accommodate a truth too large for medical equipment to measure. Marina saw her mother as a 16-year-old girl, holding her own dying mother's hand. Saw her great-grandmother, barely more than a child herself, making an impossible choice in a world that offered women no real choices at all. And she saw the thread connecting all of them, not a curse, but a covenant. Protection for the bloodline in exchange for willing guardians. Women who chose transformation over abandonment, who crossed willingly into whatever lay beyond so their daughters could live. The dates on the cradles, Marina breathed. They're not predictions, they're promises. Each woman setting the terms of when she'll fulfill her part of the agreement. Dr. Ramirez was talking about admitting her for observation, about psychiatric evaluation and medication that could help with postpartum psychosis. But her words felt like echoes from another world, one Marina was already beginning to leave behind. On the ultrasound screen, Sophia's hand opened and closed as if waving. Marina understood then why her mother had waited, why Elena had spent 6 years after Marina turned 16 putting off the inevitable, trying to give her daughter as much life as possible before the truth could claim them both. She'd gambled that Marina would be strong enough at 28 to make the choice that Elena herself had been too young to make at 16, the choice between saving herself and saving her daughter. Except it wasn't really a choice at all, was it? Marina had known her answer the moment she saw Sophia's name carved in that impossible wood. She'd known it every time her daughter moved in response to her voice, every time she'd imagined holding her, every time she'd dared to dream of their future together. Some loves were stronger than the boundary between life and death, and Marina finally understood what her mother had died trying to teach her. Marina sat perfectly still for 3 heartbeats, feeling the truth settle into her bones like gravity finding its center. The medical equipment continued its steady chorus around her, but she was no longer drowning in its urgency. Instead, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Clarity. I need to go, she said quietly, her hands moving to remove the fetal monitor straps. Marina. Absolutely not. Dr. Ramirez stepped forward, her professional authority reasserting itself. You're experiencing a psychological crisis. I cannot in good conscience. You can't help me. Marina's voice carried no anger, only certainty. None of this can help me. But that doesn't mean I'm helpless. She stood slowly, her hand resting on her belly where Sophia had gone completely still, as if waiting. The ultrasound gel was cold against her skin, but everything else felt warm, charged with purpose. For the first time since finding the cradles, Marina wasn't running from her heritage, she was walking toward it. There are other people I need to talk to, Marina said, reaching for her purse. People who understand what my mother went through, what my grandmother went through, what I'm going through now. Linda moved to block the door, her kind face creased with worry. Honey, you're not thinking clearly. That woman on the phone, Senora Vega, Marina said firmly. Her name is Senora Vega, and she's been where I am now. She's survived what I'm facing. The word survived hung in the air like a revelation. Because that's what the older woman had done, wasn't it? Found a way through the choice that didn't end in death. The cradle with her daughter's name had been empty not because the prediction failed, but because she'd discovered another path. I'm not the first woman in my family to want a different ending, Marina continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. My mother tried too. She researched, she prepared. She fought against fate for 28 years, and she left me everything I need to finish what she started. Dr. Ramirez was pulling out her phone, probably calling for a psychiatric consult or security, but Marina felt no urgency to escape. Instead, she felt the peculiar peace that came with finally understanding the true shape of her problem. A storage unit, she murmured, pieces clicking together rapidly now. She didn't just leave me the cradles, she left me research, documentation, probably years of it. She thought of all the boxes she hadn't yet opened, the papers and notebooks she'd been too frightened to examine closely. What if Elena hadn't just been documenting the family curse? What if she'd been documenting attempts to break it? I need to go back there, Marina said, moving past Linda with gentle determination. And I need to call Carmen. Her sister. The one person who'd known Elena longer than Marina had, who might remember things from their childhood that could help. Carmen had always been practical, skeptical of anything that couldn't be quantified or solved through conventional means, but she'd also loved their mother enough to help pay for the storage unit, even without understanding why it mattered. "Marina, please." Dr. Ramirez's voice carried genuine desperation now. "At least let me call your emergency contact. Your sister—" "I'll call her myself," Marina said firmly. "From the storage facility, where we can see everything Mom left behind, together." She paused at the door, turning back to face the doctor who'd tried so hard to help her within the boundaries of what she understood. "Dr. Ramirez, if something happens to me today, I need you to know that it won't be because you failed. You've taken excellent care of me and Sophia. But some things exist outside medical intervention, and pretending otherwise won't make them go away." "The blood work," Dr. Ramirez said desperately. "At least wait for the blood work. If there's something wrong—" "There's nothing wrong with my blood," Marina said gently. "There never was. But there's everything wrong with trying to solve a spiritual problem with physical tools." Sophia stirred then, a slow roll that felt like agreement, like encouragement, like a daughter telling her mother that she was finally understanding. Marina walked out of the medical office feeling lighter than she had in months, not because her problems had disappeared, but because she was finally walking toward them instead of away. She had allies now. Senora Vega with her hard-won knowledge, Carmen with her fierce protective instincts, and Elena with whatever wisdom she'd managed to preserve in that storage unit. Most importantly, she had Sophia. Not as a victim of an ancient curse, but as a partner in breaking it. For the first time since opening that impossible cradle, Marina allowed herself to believe that there might be a way for both of them to survive what was coming. She had 3 hours to find out if love could rewrite destiny. Marina stood outside the medical building, autumn wind cutting through her sweater as reality crystallized around her with startling sharpness. The afternoon sun hung low in the October sky, casting everything in amber light that made her skin look translucent. 3 hours until sunset. 3 hours to unravel what her mother had spent decades trying to solve. Her phone buzzed, Carmen calling back, probably after receiving some frantic message from Dr. Ramirez's office. Marina let it ring once more before answering. "You walked out of the hospital." Carmen's voice was tight with controlled panic. "The doctor called me. She thinks you're having some kind of breakdown." "Maybe I am," Marina said, surprising herself with the admission. "But not the kind she thinks. Carmen, I need you to meet me at the storage unit. Now." "Marina, no. You need to go back to—" "Mom didn't abandon us." The words came out harder than Marina intended, cutting through whatever objection Carmen was building. "She was protecting us, and now I need to finish what she started, but I can't do it alone." The silence stretched long enough that Marina wondered if the call had dropped. When Carmen finally spoke, her voice carried a different quality, older, more careful. "What did you find in there?" "Answers. Questions." "I don't know yet." Marina was already walking toward her car, each step feeling like a commitment to something irreversible. "But whatever's happening to me, it happened to her too, and her mother, and probably every woman back to whoever made the original choice." She could hear Carmen moving around on the other end, the jingle of keys, the slam of a door. "I'm coming." "But Marina, if this gets too weird, if you start talking about supernatural things like you're planning to hurt yourself—" "I'm not going to hurt myself." Marina settled into the driver's seat, one hand automatically moving to cradle her belly where Sophia lay unusually quiet. "But I might have to risk everything to save everything. There's a difference." "That," Carmen said grimly, "is exactly what I'm afraid of." The storage facility looked different in the slanted afternoon light, more like a gateway than a graveyard of abandoned belongings. Marina parked and waited, watching other customers load boxes and furniture into their cars. Normal people dealing with normal problems. Moving, decluttering, storing seasonal decorations. Simple solutions to manageable complications. She envied them with an intensity that surprised her. Carmen arrived 10 minutes later, pulling up with the sharp efficiency that had made her an excellent teacher and an even better crisis manager. But when she stepped out of her car, Marina saw something she rarely witnessed in her older sister. Genuine fear. "You look different," Carmen said without preamble, studying Marina's face with uncomfortable intensity. "Calmer." That worries me more than if you were panicking." "I'm done panicking," Marina replied, pulling out the storage unit key. Panic was just noise keeping me from hearing what I needed to hear. They walked between the rows of metal doors in silence, their footsteps echoing off concrete. Marina felt a strange doubling sensation, as if she were watching herself from outside, a pregnant woman walking toward her family's secrets with her sister, the October sun turning everything golden and finite. "There," Marina said, stopping in front of Unit 247. "Everything Mom couldn't tell us is in there." Carmen looked at the unremarkable metal door with visible skepticism. "Marina, before we open this, before we go any further down whatever path you're on, I need you to promise me something." "What?" "Promise me that no matter what we find in there, we make decisions together. No running off, no mysterious phone calls to people I don't know, no choosing martyrdom over solutions." Carmen's voice carried the authority of someone who'd spent years managing rooms full of teenagers, but underneath it, Marina heard something else. Desperation. "I can't lose you too." The admission hung between them like a bridge Marina hadn't known existed. Her sister, who'd always seemed so self-sufficient, so focused on practical solutions and measurable outcomes, was asking her not to disappear the way Elena had. Not to choose sacrifice over survival. "I promise," Marina said, and meant it. "But Carmen, I also need you to promise me something." "What?" "If we find evidence that the only way to save Sophia is for me to make the same choice Mom made, the same choice they all made, you won't try to stop me." Carmen's face went very still. "Marina." "Promise me," Marina repeated, her hand finding the padlock on the storage unit door. "Because if I'm right about what this is, if the pattern holds, then fighting it only makes it worse. Mom waited as long as she could, but eventually the choice gets made one way or another. And I will not let my daughter pay the price for my cowardice." Sophia moved then, a single decisive kick that seemed to emphasize the point. Carmen stared at the storage unit door for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "I promise. But only if you promise we exhaust every other option first." "Deal," Marina said, and turned the key. The metal door rolled up with a screech that seemed to echo through dimensions, and Marina stepped into the storage unit feeling like she was crossing a threshold between worlds. The afternoon light slanted through the doorway, illuminating the familiar chaos of cardboard boxes and forgotten belongings, but everything looked different now, charged with purpose instead of abandonment. Carmen followed close behind, her sharp intake of breath audible when she saw the wooden cradles arranged against the far wall like a museum exhibit of impossible things. "Jesus," Carmen whispered, moving toward them with the slow, careful steps of someone approaching a dangerous animal. "These are... how many are there?" Marina watched her sister examine the nearest cradle, the one carved for Esperanza Morales, 1892, each one with a name and date, each one marking when someone like us made the choice I'm facing now. Carmen's fingers traced the carved letters with academic precision, her teacher's mind automatically cataloging details. "The craftsmanship is incredible. This wood, it's old, really old. And the carving technique, it's consistent across all of them, like they were made by the same person. Or the same force," Marina said quietly. She moved past Carmen toward the boxes she hadn't yet explored, feeling Sophia stir restlessly as if sensing they were close to something vital. "Mom left me more than just the cradles. She left me her research." The first box Marina opened contained newspaper clippings dating back decades, obituaries for young mothers, birth announcements that became death notices, medical records documenting unexplained complications in perfectly healthy pregnancies. All of them bearing variations of their family name: Castillo, Morales, Rodriguez. The maiden names shifting through generations, but the maternal line unbroken. "Look at this," Marina said, pulling out a folder thick with Elena's handwriting. The pages were covered with family trees, genealogical charts that stretched back over a century, each branch ending abruptly with a death in childbirth. She mapped it all, every single woman. Carmen moved closer, her skepticism warring with the undeniable evidence spread before them. This could be coincidence, genetic predisposition to complications, poor medical care. "Could be," Marina agreed, opening another box. This one contained older documents, birth certificates, marriage licenses, immigration papers written in Spanish and faded with age. "Except for this." She pulled out a leather journal, its pages yellow and brittle, filled with elegant script in a language that was Spanish but not quite. Spanish mixed with words Marina didn't recognize, indigenous terms that seemed to pulse with meaning just beyond her understanding. "It's Bisabuela Esperanza's journal," Marina breathed, recognizing the name from the first cradle. Mom's great-grandmother. The first one. Carmen leaned over Marina's shoulder as they opened the journal carefully. The early entries were mundane, daily life in a small Mexican village, preparing for marriage, excitement about pregnancy. But as the months progressed, the tone shifted dramatically. "The curandera came to see me today," Marina read aloud, translating slowly. "She says the dreams are not dreams. She says my daughter carries more than my blood. She carries the accumulated wisdom of our ancestors, waiting to be born. But wisdom has a price." "Curandera," Carmen murmured. "A traditional healer." Marina turned the page, her hands trembling slightly. The handwriting here was more urgent, desperate. "She offered me a choice. Walk through the veil willingly when my daughter is ready to emerge, and she will carry our combined strength forward. Refuse, and watch her soul fragment under the weight of what she cannot yet hold. The curandera says some bloodlines are chosen to bridge worlds, but the bridge must be built with willing sacrifice." The storage unit seemed to grow colder as Marina continued reading. "I understand now. This is not a curse. It is a covenant made by someone so long ago that even the curandera has forgotten who. Each generation, one woman opens the door between life and death so the next can pass through safely. We are guardians of our own daughters' souls." Sophia kicked hard, as if responding to her ancestors' words across more than a century of separation. "Marina," Carmen's voice was barely audible. "Keep reading." The final entry was dated the day before Esperanza's death. "I have seen what lies beyond the threshold. It is not ending, it is transformation. We do not die, mija. We become something larger, something that can protect our daughters from both sides of existence. I go willingly, knowing I will never truly leave you. When your time comes, you will understand. When your daughter's time comes, you will help her choose." Marina looked up to find Carmen staring at the cradles with new understanding, her face pale but determined. "There's more," Marina said, reaching for another box. "Mom's notes. Her research into breaking the pattern. And something else. Correspondence with other families. Other women who found different answers. The final test wasn't just about accepting her heritage. It was about deciding whether to honor it or transform it entirely." Marina's hands shook as she opened her mother's correspondence, and the storage unit suddenly felt smaller, as if the walls were pressing inward. The first letter was addressed to Elena in careful script, postmarked just 2 years ago. "Your daughter will face the choice soon," the letter began. "I can feel it across the distance. My name is Rosa Vega, and I am writing because 43 years ago I stood where you stand now, and I found another way." "Senora Vega," Marina whispered, recognizing the name from her phone calls. She wasn't just another family member, she was someone who broke the pattern, Carmen finished, her voice tight with understanding. The air in the storage unit began to shimmer, like heat waves rising from summer pavement, but cold instead of warm. The cradles seemed to pulse with their own inner light, and Marina felt something vast and ancient turn its attention toward them. "Marina," Carmen said urgently, "we need to leave, now." But Marina couldn't move. The letters were scattered at her feet, and she could see fragments of other attempts, other women who'd tried to break free. Most of the correspondence was unfinished, ending mid-sentence or cutting off entirely. Only Rosa Vega's letters continued past the due date. The temperature plummeted. Marina's breath came out in visible puffs as shadows began gathering in the corners of the unit, despite the afternoon sunlight streaming through the doorway. The shadows moved with purpose, reaching toward them with fingers that weren't quite fingers. "She's here," Marina said, and somehow she knew with absolute certainty that it was Elena. Not Elena as she had been in life, but Elena as she had become. Something between worlds, caught in the covenant she'd tried so desperately to break. Carmen grabbed Marina's arm, trying to pull her toward the exit, but Marina planted her feet. "I'm not running anymore." The shadows coalesced into a familiar shape. Elena's silhouette, but wrong somehow, stretched and flickering like a candle flame in wind. When she spoke, her voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, layered with harmonics that made Sophia thrash wildly in Marina's womb. "Mija, you don't understand what you're attempting." "Then explain it to me," Marina said, stepping forward despite every instinct screaming at her to flee. Tell me what you couldn't tell me when you were alive." Elena's shade moved closer, and Marina could see her face now, beautiful and terrible, marked by knowledge no living woman should possess. "The covenant isn't just about our family. We are one thread in a web that holds the boundary between life and death. Cut our thread, and others fray. Break the pattern And what?" Marina demanded. "Other mothers get to live. Other daughters don't have to choose between themselves and their children. That sounds like a price worth paying." "You think like the living," Elena said sadly. "You cannot see the consequences of your choice. If the covenant breaks, Sophia will carry the weight meant for generations. She will not survive it." Carmen's grip on Marina's arm tightened, but Marina pulled free. Around them, the shadows were taking new shapes, the silhouettes of other women, other mothers who had made the choice. Esperanza, and dozens more stretching back through time. "Show me," Marina said, her voice cutting through the supernatural chorus rising from the cradles. "Show me what happens if I choose differently." The shadows surged forward, and suddenly Marina was somewhere else entirely. She stood in a delivery room, but everything was wrong. The monitors screamed warnings, and Sophia, her beautiful daughter, lay still and blue in the doctor's hands. Marina watched herself bleeding out on the table while medical staff worked frantically to save them both, and she understood with horrible clarity that this wasn't sacrifice. This was the cost of refusing the covenant. "You see?" Elena's voice whispered. "This is what happens when the pattern breaks. The choice becomes no choice at all." But Marina also saw something else in the vision. Carmen, holding Sophia, weeping but alive. Her daughter might not survive the breaking of the covenant, but she wouldn't be bound to it either. The cycle would end. "There has to be another way," Marina said, returning to the storage unit with tears streaming down her face. "Rosa Vega found one. Show me what she did." The shadows recoiled as if burned, and Elena's form began to fade. "Some paths cannot be shown, only walked. But know this, Mia. If you choose the path that has never been chosen, you walk it alone. We cannot follow where you're going." "Then I'll walk it alone," Marina said, reaching for Rosa Vega's final letter with trembling hands. The confrontation that would determine not just her fate, but the fate of every daughter who came after, was about to begin. The letter in Marina's hands felt warm despite the frigid air, as if Rosa Vega had infused it with her own life force. The paper was newer than the others, dated just 3 months before Elena's death, and as Marina unfolded it, the shadows around them writhed in apparent agony. "Elena, mi hermana," the letter began. "By the time you read this, I will have crossed over, not through sacrifice, but through transformation. I have found the third path, the one they don't want us to see. The covenant can be fulfilled without death, but only if we're willing to give up something even more precious than our lives." Carmen pressed closer, reading over Marina's shoulder while keeping one eye on the increasingly agitated shadows. What could be more precious than life? Marina continued reading, her voice barely above a whisper. "We must give up our daughters, not to death, but to freedom. The covenant demands a bridge between worlds, yes, but it never specified the bridge must be built with our bones. I offered something else instead. My connection to Sophia's daughter, my claim on the bloodline, my right to guide and protect her from beyond. I severed the maternal bond willingly, completely, so she could choose her own path without the weight of our history." The shadows erupted into chaos, Elena's form becoming more solid, more desperate. "No, mija. You don't understand what that means. To cut the bond is to lose yourself entirely." Rosa didn't survive the severing. She became nothing, scattered to wind. But Marina kept reading, driven by something deeper than fear. The price is everything we are as mothers, as protectors, as the thread connecting past to future. But the reward is everything our daughters can become, free of curses, free of choice between life and death, free to be simply human. I make this sacrifice gladly, knowing I will never hold my granddaughter, never guide her through heartbreak or celebrate her joy, never see my daughter become the woman she's meant to be. I give up my right to love them so they can love freely." Sophia went completely still in Marina's womb, as if she too were listening to words that would determine her fate. "There's more," Marina said, turning the page with trembling fingers. "The ritual must happen at the moment of birth, when the veil between worlds is thinnest. You must speak the words of release, not just of your life, but of your claim on your daughter's soul. You must choose to become nobody so she can become anybody. Carmen was crying now, understanding washing over her face. Marina, you can't. To give up your connection to Sophia, to never be able to never be her mother, Marina finished, the words hitting her like physical blows. Not in death, not in memory, not in spirit. To let her grow up knowing she had a mother, but never feeling that connection, never being guided by it. The supernatural chorus around them grew louder, dozens of maternal voices pleading, warning, demanding she choose the familiar sacrifice over this unprecedented one. But beneath their clamor, Marina heard something else, a single voice, younger and clearer than the rest. She's lying. The shadows parted, and Rosa Vega stepped through, not as a shade or memory, but somehow present despite being impossible. She looked exactly as Marina remembered from their phone calls, her face kind but marked by profound loss. Rosa? Marina breathed. The Covenant wants you to believe there are only two choices, Rosa said, her voice cutting through Elena's protests. Death or abandonment. Sacrifice your life or sacrifice your love. But the real third path requires both and neither. She moved between Marina and the writhing shadows, her presence somehow more solid than the supernatural chaos around them. I didn't sever the maternal bond, Elena. I transformed it. Instead of guiding my daughter from beyond death, I chose to guide her from beyond life, not as a ghost bound to ancient obligations, but as love itself, freed from form. Elena's form began to stabilize, hope and terror warring in her spectral features. That's not possible. The Covenant was made by mothers who couldn't imagine love without possession, Rosa interrupted gently. But we can. Marina can. The choice isn't between life and death. It's between holding on and letting go completely. Marina understood then, the knowledge hitting her like a revelation that rewrote everything she thought she knew about sacrifice. She could keep her life by giving up Elena's protection and walking alone into uncertain consequences. She could honor the Covenant by dying and joining the generational guardianship, or she could choose what no woman in her bloodline had ever chosen, to love Sophia so completely that she released even her right to be remembered for that love. If I do this, Marina said slowly, Sophia grows up free, but she grows up thinking her mother abandoned her. She never knows how much she was loved. She'll know, Rosa said softly. Love that complete doesn't disappear. It just stops needing recognition. The cost of winning had never been clearer. Victory would require sacrificing not just her life, but her identity, her legacy, her very existence in Sophia's story. She would save her daughter by agreeing to become no one. The choice was hers alone. Marina stood in the stillness that followed her choice, the weight of what she'd decided settling around her like a shroud. The shadows had gone quiet. Even Elena's desperate protests faded to whispers, as if the universe itself was holding its breath to see what would come next. I choose the third path, Marina said, her voice stronger than she felt. I choose to love Sophia completely enough to let her go. The moment the words left her lips, the storage unit transformed. The musty air cleared, filled suddenly with the scent of jasmine and rain, the smell of her mother's garden from childhood, before everything had gone wrong. The carved cradles began to glow with soft, warm light, not the harsh supernatural gleam they'd emanated before, but something gentler, peaceful. Rosa Vega smiled, her form becoming more translucent, but somehow more real at the same time. The transformation begins now. You'll feel it happening, the loosening of the bonds, the release of the claim. It doesn't hurt the way you might expect. Marina placed her hands on her belly, feeling Sophia respond with a gentle flutter. Already she could sense something shifting between them, not the severing she'd feared, but a transformation of connection into something larger than possession, deeper than ownership. Elena's shade moved closer, her features softening from desperate terror to wondering comprehension. Mija, I tried so hard to protect you from having to make any choice at all. I thought if I could just break the Covenant myself, you could live normally, be a normal mother to a normal daughter. I know, Marina said, tears flowing freely now. Not from grief, but from a strange sense of completion. But normal was never what we were meant for. Sophia was never meant to be just mine. Carmen stepped forward, her face streaked with tears but her expression determined. What happens to you now? Do you just disappear? Rosa answered when Marina couldn't. She becomes what every mother is meant to become eventually: love without condition, guidance without control, presence without possession. Marina will exist as pure maternal force, available to Sophia whenever she needs it but never demanding recognition for it. The shadows around them began to transform too, the desperate grasping energy of the other mothers shifting into something else. Marina could see them now, generations of women who had thought the only way to love their daughters was to bind themselves to their daughters' stories through death. They were learning, through her choice, that there was another way. Elena's form was changing, becoming lighter, more joyful. I can feel it happening. The covenant is transforming, not breaking. The web between worlds isn't snapping, it's becoming something beautiful. Marina felt the first contraction then, mild but unmistakable. Sophia was coming, drawn perhaps by the completion of the choice that would set them both free. Carmen immediately moved to support her, her teacher's practicality taking over. "We need to get you to the hospital," Carmen said urgently. "Whatever's happening here, Sophia needs to be born safely." But Marina shook her head, understanding somehow that this birth couldn't happen in a sterile medical environment. Not the hospital. Home. She needs to be born in a place where love lives, not where people die. Rosa was already fading, her purpose completed, but her voice remained clear. "Trust the process, Marina. When the moment comes, you'll know what to say. The words will come from your heart, not from any ancient script." The drive home passed in a blur of increasing contractions and supernatural escort. Marina could sense the spirits of her ancestors accompanying them, no longer bound by the covenant's demands, but choosing to witness this unprecedented transformation. Elena's presence was strongest, filled with a wonder Marina had never felt from her before. By the time they reached Marina's small apartment, her labor was progressing rapidly. Carmen, despite having no medical training, seemed to know exactly what needed to be done, guided perhaps by the same force that was guiding Marina through this impossible birth. "The baby's coming fast," Carmen said, helping Marina onto her own bed. The bed where she'd grieved Elena's death, where she'd worried about Sophia's future, where she'd made the choice that led them here. As Marina pushed, feeling Sophia's descent through her body, she also felt the final transformation beginning. The maternal bond that had connected her to her daughter since conception was loosening, expanding, becoming something that belonged not just to them but to the world itself. "I can see her head," Carmen cried, wonder replacing fear in her voice. With the next contraction, Sophia slipped into the world with a cry that seemed to ring across multiple dimensions. Marina held her daughter for one perfect moment, really held her, felt the full force of their connection before she chose to release it into something larger. "Sofia Elena Castillo," Marina whispered, looking into her daughter's dark eyes. "I love you enough to set you free." The words of release came then, not ancient or mystical, but simple and true. As Marina spoke them, she felt herself becoming something new, not lost but transformed into the kind of love that asks for nothing in return. The covenant was fulfilled, but not through death, through the ultimate act of maternal love, letting go. Marina opened her eyes to sunlight streaming through familiar windows, the weight of Sophia solid and warm in her arms. For a moment she wondered if everything, the storage unit, the covenant, the impossible choice, had been nothing more than a fever dream brought on by labor. But then she felt it, the difference in herself, profound and permanent. The desperate, clawing need to protect Sophia that had consumed her for months was gone, replaced by something vast and peaceful. Love remained, but transformed. No longer possessive, no longer afraid. "She's beautiful," Carmen whispered from the chair beside the bed, her eyes red-rimmed but bright with joy. "How do you feel?" Marina considered the question carefully. How did she feel? Not empty as she'd feared, not lost. She felt expanded, as if the part of her that had been Marina Castillo, struggling single mother, had become something larger and more essential. "Different," she said finally, "but whole." Sophia stirred in her arms, tiny fist curling against Marina's chest, and Marina marveled at the sensation. She could feel their connection, but it was no longer the binding cord she'd known. Instead, it was like standing in a vast garden. She was aware of every flower, every blade of grass, but claimed ownership of none of it. Over the following days, the changes became clearer. The crushing anxiety that had shadowed her pregnancy was gone. When Sophia cried, Marina responded not from desperate maternal instinct, but from a place of calm knowing. She could sense what her daughter needed without the frantic edge that had marked every other new mother she'd known. Carmen stayed for a week, marveling at the transformation. "It's like you've been doing this for years," she said, watching Marina navigate a particularly difficult evening with Sophia. "You're so peaceful with her." Marina smiled, adjusting Sophia's position for nursing. "I think I'm finally seeing her clearly, not as an extension of myself or my fears, but as who she actually is." The visitors came gradually. Dr. Williams stopped by to check on them both, surprised by Marina's recovery and Sophia's robust health. "I've never seen a post-delivery mother so centered," she admitted. "Whatever you're doing, keep it up." Mrs. Chen from downstairs brought soup, lingering to coo over Sophia and comment on how the apartment felt different, lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted from the very air. Even the mailman remarked that Marina seemed to glow with contentment. But the most profound reunion came a month later, when Marina finally felt ready to return to the storage unit. Carmen drove her there, Sophia sleeping peacefully in her car seat. The facility looked smaller somehow, less imposing in the afternoon sunshine. Inside Unit 247, everything had changed. The cradles remained, but their desperate energy was gone. They sat quiet and still, beautiful works of craftsmanship rather than supernatural demands. Elena's presence was there too, but transformed. No longer the desperate shade Marina had encountered before. She felt like warm sunlight, like the memory of safe arms. "I can feel her," Marina said softly, holding Sophia against her shoulder. "But it's different now. She's not bound here anymore." Carmen picked up one of the cradles, the one carved with Sophia's name. "What will you do with all of this?" Marina walked among the wooden treasures, running her fingers along their carved edges. She could sense the stories each one held, the love that had gone into their creation, but the weight of obligation was gone. "Give them to other mothers," she said, "not as warnings or burdens, but as gifts. They're beautiful. They should be used for what they were always meant for, holding babies safely while they sleep." Over the following weeks, Marina found herself reconnecting with the world in ways she'd never expected. At the grocery store, she struck up conversations with other mothers, offering calm advice without the desperate need to share her own struggles that had marked her pregnancy. At Sophia's pediatric appointments, she found herself naturally gravitating toward anxious new parents, her presence somehow settling their fears without her saying a word. The difference was most apparent during Sophia's fussy periods. Where other new mothers grew frantic with sleepless nights and endless crying, Marina remained centered. She could sense what Sophia needed, sometimes comfort, sometimes space, sometimes just the knowledge that she was loved, and provide it without the exhausting emotional labor that typically consumed new motherhood. "It's like you've tapped into some universal mother wisdom," Carmen observed, during one of their weekly coffee dates, watching Marina soothe Sophia with seemingly effortless grace. Marina considered this, watching her daughter's dark eyes track the movement of leaves outside the cafe window. Maybe that's exactly what happened. Maybe the choice I made connected me to something larger than just my own maternal instincts. She was different, fundamentally changed by the experience of choosing love over possession. But rather than feeling diminished, she felt expanded. No longer just Marina Castillo, but part of something vast and nurturing that existed to help children grow into who they were meant to become. The covenant was fulfilled, the pattern broken and transformed, and in its place was something entirely new. Love that asked for nothing in return except the chance to witness its beloved bloom. 2 years later, Marina stood in the nursery she'd painted sunshine yellow, watching Sophia take her first tentative steps between the coffee table and the couch. Each wobbling step was a small miracle. Not because walking was unusual for an 18-month-old, but because Marina could witness it with pure joy, unclouded by the possessive anxiety that had once consumed her. "Mama, look," Sophia squealed, clapping her hands before tumbling onto her padded bottom with a giggle that filled the room like music. Marina scooped her daughter up, marveling as she did every day at the easy contentment between them. Sophia was thriving, curious, fearless, radiating the kind of confidence that came from feeling unconditionally loved, without being overwhelmed by it. She explored the world with bright eyes and busy hands, secure in the knowledge that her mother was there when needed, but never hovering with desperate protectiveness. The transformation in their daily life was profound. Where Marina had once planned obsessively for every possible danger, she now moved through their routines with graceful intuition. When Sophia fell, Marina kissed the scrape and helped her try again. When Sophia fussed at bedtime, Marina could sense whether she needed comfort, a diaper change, or simply the space to settle herself. The frantic edge that marked so many parent-child relationships was absent, replaced by something both deeper and lighter. Their apartment had become a gathering place for other mothers in the building. Women gravitated toward Marina without fully understanding why, drawn by her unusual calm and the way being around her seemed to ease their own parenting anxieties. Mrs. Chen brought her granddaughter to play with Sophia. Young mothers from down the hall stopped by for coffee and stayed for hours, somehow feeling more capable after spending time in Marina's presence. "You should write a book," Carmen suggested during one of their walks through the park, watching Marina help Sophia navigate the playground with perfect balance between encouragement and independence. "Other mothers need to know what you've learned." But Marina knew her gift couldn't be taught through words. What she'd gained came from the choice she'd made, the willingness to transform love itself rather than cling to its familiar forms. She'd become something like a tuning fork for maternal energy, helping other women find their own center through proximity rather than instruction. The storage unit had been cleared months ago, the beautiful cradles donated to young families throughout Bakersfield. Marina kept only one, the cradle carved with Sophia's name, which now sat in their living room holding stuffed animals and board books. Sometimes, when Sophia napped inside it, Marina could feel Elena's presence like warm sunlight, no longer desperate or bound, but simply loving. Dr. Williams had asked Marina to speak at new mother support groups at the hospital, amazed by her patient advocacy work. Marina had developed an instinct for identifying mothers struggling with postpartum anxiety or depression, approaching them with gentle offers of practical help that somehow opened doors to deeper healing. She never spoke of her own supernatural experience, but something in her presence reminded women that motherhood could be joyful rather than just overwhelming. "There's something different about her," Marina overheard one mother tell another after a support group meeting. "Like she's figured out some secret the rest of us are still learning." The secret, Marina knew, was surrender. Not the defeat kind, but the expansion kind, the willingness to love so completely that you released your need to control the outcome. She'd discovered that maternal love at its highest form was not about holding on, but about creating safe space for growth. Sophia was walking steadily now, chattering in the mixed English and Spanish that delighted Marina's heart. She showed no signs of the supernatural sensitivity that had marked their family line. Instead, she seemed beautifully, wonderfully ordinary, a little girl who laughed easily, hugged freely, and approached the world with the confidence of someone who had never doubted she was loved. As evening settled over their apartment, Marina prepared Sophia's dinner while her daughter played, blocks on the kitchen floor. Through the window, she could see other families in the building. Mothers helping with homework, fathers coming home from work, the normal rhythms of life continuing as they always had. But Marina's life was no longer normal, and she was grateful for it. She'd been transformed into something new, a mother who could love without fear, guide without controlling, protect without possessing. The ancient pattern was broken, replaced by something unprecedented, love that grew stronger through letting go. Sophia looked up from her blocks, dark eyes bright with mischief, and reached her arms toward Marina. "Up, Mama." Marina lifted her daughter, feeling the solid weight of her, the trust in her small body, the future spreading before them both like an open road. Sophia would grow up free from the covenant that had bound their family for generations, free to become whoever she chose to be, and Marina would be there to witness it all. Not as a desperate guardian fighting fate, but as love itself, asking for nothing more than the privilege of watching her daughter bloom. The curse was broken, the covenant was fulfilled, and in its place was something entirely new, a love story without an ending, only endless beginning.